Filmmaking is known as a collaborative medium, but often the director is given most of the credit, for better or worse. Should the director be known as the author of a film? This controversial idea was introduced decades ago, and today we're going to look at both sides.
I was sort of raised aesthetically on auteur theory, and it's not that way. You're a band leader.
What is auteur theory? It is perhaps most helpful to think of auteur theory as the theory that states the director is the author of a film. Critic Andrew Sarris coined the term auteur theory, but the basis of the theory was introduced by François Truffaut in the 1954 article A Certain Trend of French Cinema. Truffaut suggested that directors should be recognized as the primary creative force behind films, likening them to authors in literature. The piece focused on deriding what Truffaut called a metteur en scène, directors who simply stage scenes from scripts largely adapted from literary works, without adding much in the way of style. In France, these films were regarded as a tradition of quality, but Truffaut saw them as limiting and falling far short of what cinema could achieve. They simply worked their shift, he wrote, taking good care not to break any taboos. He advocated for directors to treat film like a unique medium of storytelling, rather than recorded stage plays. In 1962, Andrew Sarris published Notes on the Auteur Theory in an attempt to formalize the concept. Some critics argued that the emphasis on a director as the ultimate author overlooks the collaborative nature of filmmaking. Pauline Kael, for example, rebuked Sarris's Notes on Auteur Theory in her essay Circles and Squares by deconstructing the argument that an auteur is great simply by nature of being an auteur. Richard Brody writes, "There's no critical term more bedeviled than auteur." So what is it about auteur theory that has critics so divided? Today, we're going to look at Andrew Sarris's 3 premises of auteur theory to see how they stack up against contemporary criticism.
So, let's start from the beginning.
The first premise of the auteur theory is the technical competence of a director as a criterion of value. If a director has no technical competence, no elementary flair for cinema, he's automatically cast out from the pantheon of directors. Sarris's pantheon of directors was established later in his 1968 book, The American Cinema, as 14 auteurs who represented the best cinema had to offer. Nowadays, there's truth to the notion that some directors are considered more technician than auteur. Consider Solo: A Star Wars Story, for example. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller proved their technical competence directing movies like The Lego Movie and 21 Jump Street. But their emphasis on a signature blend of comedy and action proved too auteur for Disney. Ron Howard was brought in to spearhead Solo after Lord and Miller left the project. Howard's steady direction shepherded the film to the finish line, but few would call his work the stuff of an auteur. Critic Michael Leader observed that Howard felt like a safe pair of hands, in a way suggesting he was more technician than auteur. Sarris's assertion that a director must be technically competent to create a great film overlooks a key consideration. Does one need to know the rules in order to break them? There's no denying that films that break the rules are capable of greatness. Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless broke many rules through the use of avant-garde filmmaking techniques. But we know that Godard was cognizant of filmmaking conventions. He was a critic at Carrière du Cinéma. But suppose he hadn't known the rules. Would we then consider Godard's work technically incompetent? And if we did, would we consider him a bad director? Truffaut called for rule-breaking in his original essay, which obviously inspired Godard and the rest of the French New Wave to eschew cinematic conventions. But the issue returns to an intent to break the rules, or build new ones in their stead, which we've seen throughout cinema history in movements like Surrealism and Dogma 95. Even if a filmmaker doesn't intend to break the rules, like the legends we've highlighted here, they may still stumble onto greatness. The infinite monkey theorem states that if you give a monkey a typewriter and enough time, they'll eventually create a great piece of literature. Sarris's insistence on technical competence as criterion of value seems almost antithetical to the ideas of an auteur, partly because it can't be proved, but mostly because it strips the director of a more crucial characteristic, their personal expression. The second premise of the auteur theory is the distinguishable personality of the director as a criterion of value. A director must exhibit certain recurrent characteristics of style, which serve as his signature. The way a film looks and moves should have some relationship to the way a director thinks and feels. Style can take the form of visuals, stories, and casts. A recurrent style can help audiences identify with the director. Wes Anderson's visuals are known for their symmetrical compositions, vibrant color palettes, and meticulous set design. Martin Scorsese is known for gangster stories and religious epics. And Akira Kurosawa featured actor Toshiro Mifune in 16 of his films. But is repetition for the sake of repetition a good thing? Or would it be better to praise a director for trying something different? Anderson, Scorsese and Kurosawa may feature repeating elements in many of their films, but they also aren't afraid to mix things up. Anderson dropped the vibrant color palette for part of The French Dispatch. Scorsese broke trend with gangsters and religion with The Age of Innocence. And Kurosawa directed a Mifune-less cast in Ikiru. There's always going to be a degree of recurrence between films. Cale observes, in every art form, critics traditionally notice and point out the way the artists borrow from themselves as well as from others, and how the same devices, techniques and themes reappear in their work. But these recurrences should not determine whether or not a director is considered great. Consistency contributes to a discernible style and distinguishable personality. But there are levels to which directors borrow from themselves, and how that borrowing impacts their overall style. Hayao Miyazaki uses an aeronautical motif in most of his films, but they vary greatly in their representation. One, a witch on a broomstick. Another, when pigs fly. Miyazaki movies feature flying, but that doesn't mean they all feel the same. Conversely, Michael Haneke shot his own film Funny Games twice, in 1997 and in 2007. Despite being a shot-for-shot remake, some argued that this retread was evidence of him being an auteur. But Haneke said, "I don't see myself as this sort of dark auteur. I think my works are realistic. I'm concerned with holding up a mirror to society." So although the audience may identify a director's distinguishable personality as evidence of being an auteur, the director themselves may refute the auteur label.
When people call you an auteur director, does that make you feel weird, or do you agree with it? Yeah. Why?
Well, I'm still learning my craft.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. No, you can't just...
Spoken like an auteur.
That's exactly what an auteur would say.
The third and ultimate premise of the auteur theory is concerned with interior meaning, which is the tension between a director's personality and his material. Yorgos Lanthimos is known for surreal and thought-provoking narratives, often characterized by off-key dialogue.
Look at me! How dare you! Close your eyes!
And story worlds. Sofia Coppola's films reflect an ethereal and atmospheric style, typically exploring themes of isolation and identity. And Terry Gilliam's imaginative works immerse its audience into his weird and wonderful personality, usually through intricate and inventive production design. However, focusing on interior meaning may lead to overanalyzation of a director's intentions.
Really, right back to the beginning of my career, people who really try and understand the structure or analyze it as they're watching it tend to get very frustrated with it and dislike the film intensely. People who kind of just let it wash over them, which is more the way I'm intending it, they tend to sort of to to get it the way I intended it a little bit more.
Don't try to understand it. Feel it.
Just because a director appears to have a certain type of personality doesn't mean it will reflect in their films. Nor should we, as an audience, presume that a film's mood is a reflection of the director's feelings. In a scathing critique, Pauline Kael asks, is internal meaning any different from meaning? If the audience garners meaning different from the author's intent, does that make their criticism any less valid?
To me, it's very obvious. I mean, of course, King Kong is a metaphor for the slave trade. I'm not saying the makers of King Kong meant it to be that way, but that's the movie that they made, whether they meant to make it or not.
Thus is the problem with authorial intent. Roland Barthes raised the issue of authorial intent in his 1967 essay, The Death of the Author, in which he argued that a writer kills their authorial voice through the process of writing. Barthes' criticism is a study of semiotics, aka how signs and symbols develop meaning. In the case of The Death of the Author, meaning escapes a writer through the process of its own creation. Writer ceases to be author and becomes a scripter instead. More simply, you cannot control how people are going to react to your story.
I thought that what Chuck was talking about was a cautionary tale about what to do with the anger that's engendered by your disenfranchisement.
You may mean one thing, but the audience may assume the opposite.
The fact that it's been misinterpreted by people whose point of view I couldn't really imagine is alarming, I guess.
So the next time you watch a movie, consider the death of the author and whether or not meaning escapes creator through the act of creation. Artists other than directors have been called auteurs. Musician Brian Wilson has been characterized as a genius with a singular sonic style. Screenwriter Charlie Kaufman's scripts are identifiably somber and surreal. And designer Sam Barlow's oeuvre of games features stories of crime and corruption told through interactive live-action video. The auteur theory debate asks us to consider who we consider the author of a film and where we direct our criticism. Kael writes, "Criticism is an art, not a science, and a critic who follows rules will fail in one of his most important functions, perceiving what is original and important in new work and helping others to see." Auteur theory gives credit and blame to the director. But wouldn't the credit and blame be more accurately representative if it were shared by the many people who worked on a film? Perhaps there isn't one right way to criticize film. That's why film theory is so valuable for expanding our understanding of stories and the medium. The contemporary definition of auteur theory has changed from Truffaut's original theorization, proving Barthes' supposition that meaning escapes a writer's authorial intent. Which film theory would you like us to cover next? Be an author and let us know in the comments below. And subscribe to Studio Binder for more filmmaking videos.